During the 1980s, many of the really big stories at CNN took place in the United States. But by 1989, it was truly an international network, ready to go live with breaking news anywhere in the world.
Unbelievable. We all came here to cover a summit and we walked into a revolution. Good morning from Beijing. Good evening to you, your time in the United States. If I sound out of breath, it's because I've come down in an elevator and I have run to the CNN anchor position. I went to Beijing to cover a very important summit. The Chinese and the Russians finally were going to do something about this rift between them.
Protesting students literally stole the stage out from under Gorbachev.
Thousands of protesters remain camped in Beijing's downtown Tienanmen Square, demanding democracy and vowing to stay put through the Gorbachev visit.
This situation just deteriorated in the square to the point that the Chinese leadership decided that they were going to crack heads and clear the square.
Then came word that troops were massing on the outskirts of Beijing. The mood grew sullen. Protesters began to mass around the perimeter of the square. The government then went on public address systems to say continued demonstrations were illegal.
At this time, the government...
You kept saying, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And the Chinese were watching us, and the Chinese didn't like the coverage.
Here in Beijing, the People's Liberation Army, blocked by the people. The troops cannot move to clear Tiananmen Square.
Chinese government saw the demonstrations. I think it scared them, because they realized that suddenly there was this open spigot of information on CNN, and it was flowing out to the West. They looked to the media as part of the problem.
We were just told by the government of China that about 58 minutes from now, the government will pull the plug on all transmissions out of this nation. That is why we're rushing to get our report on the air to you. We had lookouts posted a couple blocks away from the hotel because we wanted the earliest possible warning. If they saw troops moving towards our hotel, they would be coming for us. We knew that. Instead, they sent 2 civilians into our control room. I'm being told that the government officials are coming into the CNN control room now.
The mandate was do whatever it takes, do what you can to try to stay on the air.
You have him call us?
Somebody started shooting it.
And explain to us
what was going on, this negotiation between the Chinese officials and our producer, Alec, and me in Atlanta.
That we require a letter. Is that our company's policy, correct? They popped my boss, Jane Maxwell, on the air.
Yes, Alec, we'd like it in writing as to why we are being asked to pull this lead down now. Why we are being asked to be...
I told Alec I will not stop the transmission unless they withdraw the permission in writing.
Did you hear that, sir?
That was the only thing I could think of at that point.
So all we were requesting is the same thing we requested to get in here. It's a letter.
I'm known to speak like a truck driver on occasions. It made me speak in a much more hesitant fashion than I would normally do because I couldn't use the breadth of my vocabulary.
We asked for permission to be here, and if you're revoking that permission early, just send us a letter and we will be perfectly willing to comply. We normally do our fighting off camera. This time we were arguing for our broadcasting rights in front of the world.
This gentleman is writing a letter to us. He's explaining...
Finally, one of the authorities was told that he had the permission to write us a letter. And
now I'm here announcing that CNN should stop the movable Earth station and is transmitting frequencies right away.
They had complied with what we wanted, which was it in writing, and that was about as far as we could go.
Well, the government has ordered us to shut down our facility. Alec will have to shut it down.
Okay, the government's order. Our policy is the government has ordered us to shut down our facility. We are shutting down our facility.
They had the presence of mind to ask them if it was okay for our anchors and reporters to sign off.
That's the story to the moment. For all of the hard-working men and women of CNN, goodbye from Beijing. Can you imagine federal marshals storming into a newsroom telling you to stop broadcasting? After I signed off. I started crying. I realized how far away from democracy I was.
The Chinese government has effectively ended CNN's live broadcasting by satellite from Beijing.
We started getting tapes out in any way we could.
The nation is now facing a choice, to live or to die.
We would go to the airport and beg tourists, please, can you take this videotape out with you?
We are afraid of nothing, neither shedding blood, nor giving our lives, nor anything.
People who lived in China really knew the danger that they were facing in taking this tape and putting it in their suitcase and taking it out. But they did it because they thought it was important. We saw the crowds growing larger and larger and more boisterous and taking out into the streets, expanding their demonstrations beyond Tienanmen Square. And we watched the police and the military kind of encircling them and trying to control them.
Throughout the day, Army helicopters swooped low over the heart of Beijing. Some dropped leaflets warning that force would be used if the demonstrators didn't give up.
We were so desperate to get pictures out, we brought in a box that you plug a phone line into, and you could feed video frames to Atlanta.
Chaotic situation in Beijing, China right now as the army starts to move into Tiananmen Square to try
I could literally hear the bullets whizzing overhead as the soldiers moved into the square.
There are bodies and injured and dead all over the place. I can see flames from an armored personnel carrier overturned and set alight by the protesters.
At one point, the soldiers lined up, the first row in the prone position, the second row in the kneeling position, the third row in the standing position, and they were all firing. Nothing can survive that kind of shooting. And it went on for hours and hours and hours.
There simply aren't enough ambulances to deal with the wounded here.
They were totally outmanned and outgunned.
The images from the spring of 1989 remain some of the most powerful to have ever been on television screen.
The world witnessed a daring act by one man, armed with only courage, standing in the middle of the street, facing more than a dozen tanks bearing down on him. He refused to move.
He climbed up on top of the tank. He was banging on the hatch. We're all holding our breath for the longest time.
Finally, several other people ran into the street carrying a white flag and dragged the man to safety.
It represented, I think, what the students were up against.
The actual number of people killed in Beijing may never be known, but the images of the past few days will never be forgotten. Tom Mintier, CNN, Beijing.